When you think of the Mongol Empire, you probably imagine ruthless warriors on horseback, burning cities, and chaos across continents, right? But what if we told you they were more modern than today's world in many ways that might blow your mind? They were visionaries, from a postal network that puts today's mail to shame to religious freedom. In this video, we're looking into 6 surprising ways the Mongols beat us to the future. If you think you know history, think again. Stick around, and by the end, you might just see the Mongol Empire in a new light. Let's break some stereotypes. Ready? All right, let's kick things off with their most famous mail system. Let's talk about something crazy from the 1200s. The Mongol Empire covered over 9 million square miles, stretching from the Pacific Ocean in the east to the heart of Europe in the west. This was all connected through the YAM system, also known as the Mongol Postal Network. And yeah, believe it or not, the Mongol Empire had a mail system that could put today's postal service to shame. So here's how it worked. The YAM system was a high-speed communication supply network that Genghis Khan developed around 1206 AD. Genghis Khan, being the genius that he was, set up relay stations every 25 miles or so called Ortu, all over the empire. These stations were fully staffed, guarded, and stocked with fresh horses. A messenger could ride from one station to the next, swap out his tired horse for a fresh one, or hand over the message to another rider. This leapfrogging system meant messages could travel up to 125 miles in a single day. It's reported that some Mongol couriers could travel up to 200 miles a day. Imagine if your local post office worked that efficiently today. What's even cooler is these stations weren't just for messengers. They also carried official letters, military commands, and even sensitive political news using a special tablet called a paisa, which acted like a VIP pass. With it, they could stop at these stations for food, rest, and new supplies or horses. Military messengers didn't even need one. Even merchants and travelers from China, Persia, and Europe used the YAM. It was that reliable. But enough of that. We'll talk about the paisa later in the video. Genghis Khan built the roads, but his son Ogedei expanded them massively, even through mountain ranges, linking roads in the western parts of the empire. Later, Kublai Khan took things up a notch. Under him, the YAM had over 1,400 stations, 50,000 horses, 8,400 oxen, 6,700 mules, 4,000 carts, and 6,000 boats in service at all times. In snowy regions like Siberia, they even used dog sleds. Different Mongol regions had their versions of the YAM. When the great Khan died, the news reached troops in Central Europe in just over 4 to 6 weeks, which is impressive even by today's standards. Today, one snowstorm and everything shuts down. Even Marco Polo, who traveled through Mongol lands in the late 1200s, was shocked by how advanced the system was. He wrote that the Khan's couriers could carry news across the empire faster than any method available in Europe at the time. In the Middle East, it was a well-oiled communication machine. Faster, safer, and smarter than you'd ever guess for the 13th century. So, yeah, next time someone calls the Mongols barbarians, just remind them that they were running an international postal service before most countries even existed. Now, speaking of unexpected Mongol brilliance, wait till you hear what they did when it came to religion. It might surprise you how open-minded they were. Most of us picture the Mongol Empire as a land of swords and smoke, but few realize it was also one of the most religiously tolerant empires in history. Genghis Khan, a shamanist himself, didn't care what gods his people worshipped. Instead, he focused on unity. And honestly, that's a pretty modern mindset, especially compared to today's world, where people still argue online over which religion is right, or if no religion is right. Genghis Khan built an empire where Buddhists, Muslims, Christians, and even Manichaeans could live side by side. He believed that religious conflict would only weaken his empire. So what did he do? He created an official policy that guaranteed complete religious freedom. No taxes for religious leaders, no forced military service, just preach and let live. Not bad for a guy on horseback. One of the most impressive examples of this policy in action was the Mongol court itself. It wasn't unusual to find representatives of multiple religions debating theology in the presence of the Khan. Genghis Khan often invited religious scholars to his court to explain their beliefs. Historian Jack Weatherford, in his book Genghis Khan and the Making of the Modern World, states that Genghis Khan created the first international postal system, promoted meritocracy, and fostered religious freedom in a way that was centuries ahead of his time. His son, Ogedei, took it a step further. The Mongols had always been nomadic, so temples and churches weren't exactly part of their travel plans. But once they settled and built a capital, Ogedei made sure to include spaces for everyone: Buddhist temples, Christian churches, Muslim mosques, and Taoist shrines. Even Ogedei's wife was an Nestorian Christian, and no one batted an eye. Each Mongol successor state eventually adopted the religion of the region they ruled. In China, the Huan dynasty embraced Buddhism and shamanism. In the West, the other Khanates leaned into Islam. Want to learn more surprising facts about ancient empires? Subscribe and stay tuned. There's a lot more coming. By letting people believe what they wanted, the Mongols kept their empire strong and surprisingly peaceful. It helped them manage a multi-ethnic, multi-religious empire that stretched from the Pacific to the Black Sea. And, speaking of power moves, wait till you hear how the Mongols handled international travel. Let's talk about their passport system next. Back in the 13th century, while most of the world was figuring out how to survive the next invasion, the Mongol Empire had already introduced something pretty advanced, a passport system called the paisa. Yes, you heard that right. The Mongols had a travel document called the paisa. It was a tablet or badge, often made of silver or gold, that authorized its holder to travel freely across the empire. It guaranteed protection, food, horses, and even shelter at government rest stops. Much like a golden VIP pass, except it worked across thousands of miles, from Eastern Europe to China. Only trusted individuals like diplomats, merchants, and imperial messengers got one. But once you had it, doors opened, literally. The Mongol relay stations, called yam, were like modern-day highway rest stops, complete with fresh horses and warm meals. All you had to do was flash your paisa, and you were good to go. And here's the wild part. Abusing the paisa, using it without permission, or trying to fake one carried the penalty of death. That's how seriously the Mongols took their internal order and security. The genius behind the paisa was Genghis Khan himself. He created a system where trusted travelers could move freely across borders. This made the Mongol Empire one of the first to create a secure form of international travel. Now, imagine if airports today worked that smoothly. 2 stamps and a horse later, you're across the continent. And, speaking of systems, let's talk about another one. Something that hits even closer to home in today's world. How they dealt with outbreaks and disease. Yes, even the Mongols had an idea of quarantine. Back in 1346, the siege of Kaffa was in full swing. Kaffa, a bustling trading city on the Crimean Peninsula, was under attack by the Mongol army. At the time, it was controlled by Italian merchants, mostly from Genoa, and was one of the few Christian strongholds in the region. The Mongols surrounded the city, hoping to reclaim it after tensions escalated between the two powers. So far, it sounds like a regular medieval siege, right? But things took a dark turn. An outbreak of the plague hit the Mongol camp, killing soldiers by the thousands. However, the Mongols were disturbingly clever when it came to early biological warfare. According to an Italian chronicler named Gabriele de Musi, Mongol forces, struck by a plague outbreak in their camp, decided to turn their dead into literal projectiles. Using trebuchets, they launched diseased bodies over the city walls in hopes of infecting the defenders. Sounds brutal, right? It was. Whether by corpse or contaminated fleas, Kaffa was hit hard. The idea was simple: spread chaos and death without even lifting a sword. It worked too well. The disease spread fast and far, eventually contributing to the infamous Black Death in Europe. And while most of the world was still blaming bad air or angry gods, the Mongols understood that diseases could travel fast along the Silk Road, especially with their massive trading network. So, when outbreaks occurred, certain routes were shut down, trade posts were temporarily closed, travelers showing signs of illness weren't allowed to continue until they recovered, if they recovered. In short, they practice a rough version of quarantine. Not only this, but one example comes from the city of Karakorum, the Mongol capital under Ogedei Khan. Here, special medical officers were assigned to monitor illnesses. People who exhibited symptoms of unknown or contagious diseases were kept away from the general population. This was centuries before the Black Death hit Europe. Now, the Mongols, with 0 medical degrees and no Wi-Fi, managed to figure out that sick people should probably stay home. Meanwhile, we in 2020 still needed reminders to wash our hands. Not bad for folks who supposedly lived in tents and rode horses all day. The Mongols also had a surprisingly modern view of medicine. They established medical institutions and hospitals, particularly in China under Kublai Khan, where Persian, Arab, and Chinese doctors worked together. This fusion of Eastern and Islamic medicine led to a richer understanding of contagion and public health. Would you trust Genghis Khan more than a modern politician during a health crisis? Comment below and let's talk. The Mongols were balancing mobility, military goals, and public safety, which shows how surprisingly structured they really were. But wait, there's more. Let's move from plague management to something just as unexpected: how the Mongols created a travel system that puts today's border controls to shame. When most of the world was clinging to religious dogma and burning books that didn't fit the narrative, the Mongol Empire was doing something radically different. They were choosing knowledge. Genghis Khan was smart enough to know that wisdom came from all corners of the world. So, instead of forcing one belief system, he collected ideas like a library collects books. He valued what worked. If someone had a better irrigation system, a smarter tax code, or a new way to organize an army, he'd adopt it. No questions asked. They recruited astronomers, medical experts, architects, and mathematicians from across their vast empire. They brought together Chinese, Persian, Arab, and Indian scholars to share knowledge freely. Meanwhile, Europe was still debating whether bathing was sinful. Spoiler alert, the Mongols were pretty serious about hygiene. The Mongols did build networks of scholars, not just soldiers. They translated important texts across languages, Chinese to Persian, Sanskrit to Mongolian, Arabic into everything. At the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, destroyed by the Mongols in 1258, Mongol rulers later supported efforts to preserve its texts in other cities like Mehrgarh and Samarkand. One of the clearest signs was their interest in astronomy. Under Mongol patronage, Nasir al-Din al-Tusi, a Persian astronomer, built the Mehrgarh Observatory in 1258. It became one of the most advanced observatories in the world and laid the foundation for other astronomical work in Europe. Tusi's models of planetary motion would even influence Copernicus, who lived 3 centuries later. And, unlike some modern governments that ban books or suppress facts they don't like, the Mongols wanted more information, not less. Even their tolerance of different religions played into this. As long as your beliefs didn't get in the way of progress, Genghis Khan welcomed anyone with a brain and a good idea, whether they came from Baghdad or Beijing. And if you think that's impressive, just wait. Yep, we're saving the best for last. Let's talk about the legendary Silk Road. Back in the 13th century, while Europe was busy arguing over who wore the fanciest crown, the Mongol Empire was running one of the most impressive international trade systems, the Silk Route, also known as the Silk Road, which wasn't anything new. But, under Mongol rule, it became safer, faster, and more profitable than ever. Genghis Khan encouraged foreign merchants early in his career and understood one thing clearly: trade brings wealth, and wealth brings power. So, he protected traders, reduced taxes, and built rest stops along the route. These rest areas offer food, shelter, and fresh horses. Kind of like medieval highway gas stations, minus the overpriced snacks, goods like silk, spices, porcelain, and tea flowed from China to Europe. In return, glassware, wool, silver, and even musical instruments traveled east. Thanks to this route, paper, gunpowder, and printing spread across the continents. Buddhist monks, Muslim scholars, and European explorers all traveled the route, sharing knowledge and learning from others. It wasn't perfect, of course. Bandits still existed, but under the Pax Mongolica, this trade highway had safety that most modern countries would envy. Looking at you, pothole-filled highways. The Mongols knew how to manage a global network long before it was cool. They connected the East and West in ways that changed the world. So, the next time someone calls the Mongols barbaric, ask them, how many medieval empires had passports, promoted people by skill, or respected all religions? The truth is, the Mongol Empire set a standard that even today's world struggles to match. Which of these 6 facts blew your mind the most? Let us know in the comments. We love hearing your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this video on unexpected history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more powerful stories from the past.